fastening on to odd superstitions.
I had one superstition I had, probably an ill-founded superstition. We had a couple of little dogs around that base. I don't know what they were, but they weren't mutts, I don't think. They might have been a pretty nice breed of dog. But those dogs took up with Chuck Yeager and a guy named Ed McKee. And Yeager got shot down, McKee got shot down, and I wasn't gonna pet those dogs. I wanted nothing to do with those damn dogs.
On some missions, when the bombers had completed their objective and were heading home, it was time for some freelance work.
Well, with the P-51, we had a lot of gas. We had a lot of fuel. So we would say, and now, independent of the group, we as a squadron would go out and search for the Germans.
Back at the base, the ground crews waited, watching the skies. When their planes came home, if they came home, it was time for relief as well as a little bragging.
Every time we got a kill, anybody shot anybody down, you'd come across the field and slow roll. I got one, see? Big deal.
But we took our losses, too. The 357th stood over 100% casualties. It took a year to get them, but we had a lot of casualties. My best friend was, lost him. I remember I stood on, down at the flight line until the sun was down. Still in the hopes that he would get in there. He didn't make it. But you accept it. The old crutch, it's going to happen to somebody else. It's not going to happen to me. This is a great piece of faith, you know. You're wrong, but this is what you believe.
But after it's over, and when you all come home, and it's a get-together then, it's up to the club, and you get your ration of a couple ounces of booze, and you get some beer at the club, and then you find out what really happened.
Between missions, it was time to relax, forget, make do with the evening's ration of boredom and loneliness. You could sit in front of the fireplace, listen to the familiar music, the comforting sounds of laughter and jumbled conversation, and with enough imagination, you could be anywhere, calm and safe. Anywhere but home, that is.
Well, occasionally we'd have a party, you know, at the base. Now, the prerequisites for this is that there'd be a group of young ladies who would be willing to come to your air base for a dance or a party at that time, or you may have a gal someplace. I don't know. I didn't myself personally. And, but when they decided to have one of these parties, for some reason, the hospitality of England was manifest at that time. These young ladies would come out and make themselves available, and we would have a party at the officers' club. You may not have met this young lady before, but you'd meet her there. Usually we'd stock up pretty good on hooch and food at that time, and the British, believe it or not, had a tough time feeding their population. So these young ladies enjoyed the opportunity to have butter, white bread, roast beef, something like this that you don't see very much of, you know. And this was about what we did. There was a lot of drinking and a lot of horsing around and everything like that. And, let's be frank about it, sometimes it took 2 or 3 days to get the base cleaned back up again, get the gals out, but that's the facts of life.
These guys on the ground, I mean all of them. I'm speaking of the line chiefs, the crew chiefs, the bombers. A thankless job. I'm sure the thing that they'd like to see was their airplane get off on the mission. And up to an hour later, it didn't return, meaning it's going all the way. And perhaps the greatest thing then is to see their airplane come down and do a slow roll before landing. That's sort of the payoff.
You know, if you were successful, they were successful. And it used to kind of feed on it. The harder you worked, the harder they worked. And now in the summertime, we used to keep our airplanes camouflaged. We had this gray-green paint on the top side so that when somebody was above you looking down, they couldn't see you. Well, in the wintertime, when there was snow over there, it was kind of better to have the natural metal-colored airplane. We'd actually had a program there to paint them and repaint them. And I remember in the fall, I came back from a mission one time, and the first snow had hit the ground over there. I made a very casual statement of, hey, the first snow hit over there. I said, you know, pretty soon we're going to have to, you know, repaint this mother. I happened to put myself on the mission board for the next day and went home, never thought anything about it. And we had a mission coming up the next day, sure enough, and I go down there and come out to my airplane, and the thing is silver. And these guys had bloody hands. It washed it down with gasoline.
The 357th was, by 1944, a crack outfit, the top-notch assemblage of seasoned fighters. They had been tested. They had proved themselves. But there was another test to come, another mission beyond anything they had accomplished. Berlin. A raid on that city would do more than impair the Germans' capacity to wage war. It would strike an incalculable blow to their morale. Berlin was the psychological heart of the Nazi Empire. If it was not safe, no place in Germany was safe. Goering himself would say later that, when I saw the Mustangs over Berlin, I knew the war was lost.
On this particular mission, we're making landfall across into Holland, over Holland. Colonel Graham, the group commander, suddenly calls me and says there's radio silence and all, but he got my attention. He said, you got it. There's no conversation. With that, he peeled off and went home. And so suddenly I was group leader.
General Hayes, the one thing I remembered about him was that he and another guy called Colonel Dragney was, whenever we went with those guys, we knew we were going to get into a good fight. They would never shirk duty, never turn away. You know, they would get you there and get you in combat.
Well, on this particular mission, we went in, and the weather was rather poor as far as finding navigational points on the ground to orient yourself with. We didn't know exactly where we were. Tommy Hayes was leading, and he did a fine job, and we had flown the required time and distance, and we hadn't found any bombers. We hadn't seen them. We actually hadn't found Berlin, and it was beginning to look kind of bleak. And this was the only time in 77 combat missions I ever flew over there that I was ever consulted about the operation. Bless Tommy's heart, he called out and said, "Obie, where do you think we are?" I said, "I think we've gone past it."
On O'Brien's suggestion, the 357th turned around.
And we had no more than made that turn, and we hadn't been on course probably 2 or 3 minutes, so it meant we were probably still over German soil. And to our left, over here, came the 8th Air Force, a beautiful, one of the most gorgeous sights you'll ever see in your life, strung out for mile after mile after mile of silver aircraft at 20,000 feet, beautiful formation, but still down the road down there, about 20 to 25 miles from us. You go to your right over here, and here's the German Air Force. Boom! Here's the 110s starting to come in with 109 top cover. They're carrying rockets. So we immediately attacked the German aircraft.
God, the flak is a solid black. You couldn't see the bomber. It was so solid.
I picked up a 110 at about 20,000 feet and worked it over the left side. And I was following this 110 down. He was diving, I was diving. He was pulling G, I was pulling G, and set the right engine on fire. And he was still going down this dive and everything, but my guns were dropping out. Where I'd started out with 4 guns, the last I remember, I was down to about 1 gun. And I pulled up and rolled over and watched him, and he went into what I thought was a factory, and he set it on fire. There's a good-sized explosion. Whatever was in that building, tore it up pretty good. That was it. We started back up. I pulled my trigger on the guns, no guns. And now here we are at Berlin, Germany, and we haven't got gun 1 is working, I'm by myself.
It was the most massive air armada the world had ever seen. Thousands of bombers and fighter planes in a ceaseless stream that took 30 minutes to pass overhead.
These 109s had made this head-on attack and shot down 2 B-17s right in front of our eyes, and were forming up to make another head-on attack. Well, by this time we had dropped our drop tanks, and we'd got our airplanes up to speed, and we engaged them and broke up the attack.
And so I climbed up and set course for England by myself. And another 51 come and tacked on to me, and just as a matter of interest, this guy called over and said, "Who are you?" And I said, "I'm Obie O'Brien." He said, "I'm Leroy Reuter." I said, "Stick with us," and we were trying to get out of there. I think Leroy saw a 110 and called it, another 110. And I told him, I said, "Leroy, you take him." I said, "I haven't got any guns." And so we turned over towards the 110, and I told Leroy, "I'll cover you the best I can." The only thing I could do was turn into him if we were jumped and try to scare him. And fortunately, nobody bounced us, and I got to sit up there with a ringside seat and watch Leroy shoot up another 110. And it was a wonderful mission in this respect that we put 46 aircraft into the air. We had 33 of them stand target area support. The rest of them had aborted. We shot down 20 German aircraft that day and just damaged and probably destroyed some others. I think we had no combat losses due to enemy action.
The 357th cannot be summed up in numbers, although the numbers are impressive. Over 600 victories, the most for numbers of hours in the air. The victories, perhaps, were made less sweet by the memories of friends who were not there to share the triumphs. Those who survived wove a bond around each other's lives, a common thread of camaraderie, respect, and friendship. It was a time when the world promised great drama and asked the price of great danger. It was a life where the narrow cockpit of a plane was 1 minute a private doorway to the entire sky, and the next a brittle casket falling down to a field named in a foreign language. It was a life spent dueling in the sky and a life lived in the shadow of loss and sorrow. But there were, as one of the pilots said, no goodbyes and there were no regrets. The fighter aces of World War II have flown into history now. Their like will never be seen again because the nature of war has changed forever.
A fighter